I'm Julie Lyles Carr. You're listening to the Modern Motherhood Podcast from All Mom Does. Wow, what a wild season we're in right now. If you're just now finding this episode, whenever you're listening to this episode, we as a country are now many days into a stay-at-home order, a shelter-in-place order for some of us in different states. And I don't know about you, but this has put the relationships in my life in a really different setting. So at least here at my house, we have a lot of people who, for the most part, are usually in and out a lot, and we're all here together. And then there are other relationships that have become very daily relationships for me at the workplace and with the people that I partner with and minister with, that's become more of that remote lifestyle, right? But in all of it, what it really brings up is a lot of where the health of those relationships truly is. Well, today on the podcast, I have Dr. Dharius Daniels, and he is a pastor, a minister, a thought leader, a life coach, and he has a lot to say to us, whether we are in a season like this one or beyond, about relational intelligence, how we can assess where our relationships are, how to make very intentional choices about those relationships, and where to invest in those friendships and relationships that really are both helpful to us and the other person. I'm excited for you to hear him today. Dr. Dharius Daniels, thanks so much for being with us today.
I'm really excited and looking forward to our conversation.
So give us a little update on who you are, where you live, what you do, all that.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, this is what most people don't know. I've been in Jersey most of my adult life, but most people don't know I'm born and raised in Mississippi.
Okay.
A small town called Kilmichael, Mississippi. That's the name of the town. And the latest census had us at 630 people.
Whoop, whoop.
So we were a sprawling metropolitan town with no stoplights and one full-time police officer. But anyway, yeah, pastor's kid. And actually, for most of my life, had plans to go to law school, was really, really excited about it, passionate about it, but felt this call to use my life to serve others by serving the church, and ended up going to New Jersey for seminary. And God really, started feeling like a call and a pull to that particular area. And we finished seminary and planted a church there, and Changed Church has been there about 14 years. And about a year ago, we kind of expanded our footprint down into the Southeast and planted a campus in Orlando, Florida. And so I've got a number of different interests, but that is primarily where I'm spending and sowing most of my time now.
That's your heartbeat. Yeah.
Yeah.
As the daughter of two native Mississippians, I got to tell you, Dr. Dharius, you say Jersey like a Jersey boy. You have definitely transitioned from the Mississippi to the Jersey on that one.
I know. People tell me that all the time.
You're owning it. You're owning it. Now, you have a new book out called Relational Intelligence, the people skills you need for the life of purpose you want. I'm always fascinated by this topic of relational intelligence because it feels like we sort of assume, since we're human, we should just sort of know how to get along and how to navigate these things. We don't think of it as a form of an intelligence that can be grown and expanded upon. So how did you begin to first delve into this topic, and what fascinates you about it?
Well, it really came out of pain, I think. So one, pain in my own life. And then two, as I started pastoring and leading people, seeing trends, not only in my own life, but in the life of the people that I served, that people's greatest joy and greatest pain was coming from the same place. It was relationships. I noticed when I would be with people in end-of-life situations, when they were passing away, no one ever asked for things. They always asked for people. I began to see, just from personal experience and again, pastorally, that, man, you really can't live life well if you don't get this relationship thing right. Now, you can have a high standard of living and get relationships wrong, but you can't have a high quality of life and get relationships wrong. So for me, I began to see that, you know what, this is really more than intent. It requires some intentionality. It's a life skill. Intelligence doesn't always transfer from one area to the other. We have a tendency, I think, in relationships and with people to relate emotionally and not always intelligently. And I just felt like I wanted to spend some time pursuing what that looked like. And that's really where my interest in the subject kind of came from, like my own personal and pastoral pain.
Wow, that is such a great place to begin, because I think a lot of times we can see things from an intellectual standpoint, but to really find the need that people have, even though we're talking about relational intelligence and trying to move away from reacting emotionally, I do think it is so telling that it starts from that place of going, wow, what's not working, what's not happening well, and how do we correct those things? What do you think are some of the top mistakes people make within their relationships?
Well, here's one. I think probably for a certain segment of the population, I'm not sure how this relates to everyone, but I've seen this a lot in my life and sometimes in the life of people that I coach. And that is, it's really easy to allow the people who mean the most to you to get the least from you.
Oh, say that again. That is good.
Yep. That's a huge mistake, where people who mean the most to you actually get the least from you. And I've seen this, like, to me, this really applies. I've seen it apply when it comes to people like in family, but I've also seen it apply with friends, where it's like, man, we're going to spend more time together. We're going to spend more time together. We're going to spend more time together. And some crisis happens. And then people recognize that the things that I wasn't willing to adjust to spend time with that particular person, in the grand scheme of things, really, when I look back retrospectively, they really were not as important as I was making them out to be. So that's one that I think comes to the top of the list. Here's another one. This is really, I see this with people of faith, and that is assuming every relational need is my responsibility.
Yep.
Right. So part of what it means to be human, I think, is to embrace some of our limitations. God is limitless. We aren't. So part of what it means to be human is to embrace that and accept that and do the best that we can with the limited time, energy, and resources that we have. So I see a lot of overextension and things of that particular nature that come from that. And then two, assuming that relationships kind of nurture themselves. Right. When the truth of the matter is they require nurturing. Like, if anything's going to grow, there has to be an investment of time and energy in order to nurture it. And I think those are probably the three things that come to my mind.
I'm reflecting on something you said that I think is really interesting. I think a lot of times as people of faith, we feel a responsibility to befriend everyone. We really talk to our kids and youth group about saying, don't be cliquish, be willing to expand your circle. And particularly for people like you and I who lead out in ministry, we have a lot of people who come to us and expect that there will be a built-in friendship, a deep friendship. And yet it sounds like what you're saying is we don't have time to nurture 275 close relationships. So how do we love people well and yet at the same time make sure that we're not getting ourselves spread too thin when it comes to friendships and deep relationships, personal relationships?
I think that's an amazing question. And I think almost every leader on some level probably wrestles with that tension. I think it's a healthy tension, but a tension nonetheless. So I would say that when it comes to managing that, or I guess overcoming sometimes the guilt and the expectation that we put on ourselves and that others put on us to actually do that, I feel like going back to Jesus is probably going to be the best place to start. Because I would argue Jesus loved everyone biblically. That means without conditions. He valued everyone equally. He saw everyone as equally valuable in the eyes of God, but he treated people differently. And his relationship with the inner circle is the prime example of that. When he goes to the Mount of Transfiguration, he only takes Peter, James, and John. When he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, he only takes Peter, James, and John. And you see these different levels of investment. And I think some of it wasn't always a matter of preference for Jesus. I just think it was purposeful. And so I think Jesus frees us from the expectation that we have to succumb to the expectations of others as it relates to levels and degrees of intimacy and relationship and expectations that we can put on ourselves sometimes.
Right. It's interesting that you bring up that Jesus really focused in on those specific disciples, because I've heard before, well, there are the 12, and that's true. There were the 12. And so sometimes that can be used as a meter for, well, then, you can have 12 really deep personal relationships, friendships. And yet we even see Jesus whittle it down from there, which is really interesting to take a step back and realize that at some of the most pivotal moments in his ministry, he really did scale back who got the VIP ticket, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's really fascinating. We'll get right back to the interview in just a moment. I got a care package in the mail that came just in time to engage in some self-care right when I needed it most. I've gotten to try the new 3 Graces lip glosses and a couple of their other skincare products, and I absolutely love them. 3 Graces products are made of ingredients that are healthy, so I don't have to worry about toxins. And here's the other thing I love. 3 Graces' mission is not just to treat your skin, but to lift your soul. It's this beautiful combination of amazing beauty products with faith, developed by 2 women who understand the source of true beauty. Find out more by going to 3gracesbeauty.com. That's 3 as in the number 3, not the word, 3gracesbeauty.com. Well, Dr. Dharius, talk to us about this because, there is something interesting going on right now, very timely that we're talking about relationships because, a lot of us are under a stay-at-home mandate or a shelter-in-place mandate, and we are beginning to discover that we either are being sheltered in place with people that maybe we haven't invested what we should have in relationship with them. And now we're in a real time situation of focus that's going to be happening. Or we begin to realize that we are not able to reach out to those that we love having closer relationship with, but we're not seeing on a regular basis. How do you think that all of this situation right now, as we are sheltering in place, as we are doing stay at home, what do you see on the other side of this as we come out from all of this? And what can we be doing right now?
Wow, that's amazing. I think it's a great insight. So one of the things, right? So now I'm going to put on my parent hat and speak from
do it.
From the perspective of a parent with 2 boys who, my God, they're always hungry. But anyway.
Oh, yes. That is one of the big things I think we're all going to come out of this experience knowing is that our kids eat way more than we ever dreamed. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I think experiences like this, I think they make us more relationally intelligent. And this is what I mean by that. Because one of the things that it does is it puts you in proximity to people that you may have assumed you had a better gauge on who they are and where they are. Mm-hmm. So now, as I'm spending this time with my sons, I'm seeing little things and picking up little things and saying, "Oh, I need to lean in a little bit more there.
Right.
Oh, I probably need to add a little more structure to his life there. Oh, wow, it seems like he's probably been missing me there." So there are observations I'm able to make as a result of this that will help me be more intentional as a parent on the other side of this. Then, in addition to that, this is probably, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I'm saying it on your podcast. Here it is.
Okay, let's hear it. Lay it on us.
No, judge me not. I'm also recognizing personally, and this is probably the case for others too, they may not just be willing to say it. There's some people I'm missing more than others. It's not that I'm not missing others, right? But there are some people that so I'm a pastor and I'm like, man, it's, you're having to do every meeting now virtually. You can't go out to lunch with this person or that person. And I'm recognizing that there are some relationships that are probably adding more value to my life than I knew of before this experience. And now that there's some distance there, I'm like, yeah, I kind of miss this part. I think I need that.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm into that relationship differently.
Right.
This is over.
It's interesting you say that because I work closely with our praise and worship pastor. Her name is Kathleen, and we laugh about that, she's my work wife. And it's very interesting because I'm realizing in this time of shelter in place, yes, she and I are still consistently chatting with each other and on the phone and all of those things, but we have a standing lunch date every week. And it is a place where we really invest in our friendship, in addition to the fact that we see each other very frequently because of our service schedule and all of that. And And it is very strange that I'm missing her in a way that I miss my other friends. Don't get me wrong. But that rhythm of life that I've built with her that's just kind of happened is definitely interrupted right now. So I think that's a really fair thing to say, that there are certain people that you find yourself missing just a tinge more. So Dr. Dharius, tell me this, as we're in this sort of hotbed of really intense relational exposure with certain people, when we're all in-house together, when the families all got back together, how far do we go in terms of trying to correct or clean up or lean into some things when we still have a ways to go on this stay-at-home mandate? Is this a time that we really should just be ripping the Band-Aids off and really trying to figure out what's at the core into these relationships? Or is this maybe not the best time to start digging into all that? Because let's face it, we're all locked in together.
Yeah, I really feel like the answer is a combination of both. So obviously it's going to depend on a person's context and their own specific scenario. But, I really feel like one of the things that and again, I'm putting on the parenting hat again, what I would not want. So this is what I know. I know this experience is going to be etched into my children's memory for the rest of their life. They're never going to forget this. My oldest son's a high school senior. So he's
definitely going to remember.
He may not even have graduation, right? So the prom canceled and all of these things. So for me, I am thinking through how I want this experience with them, for them, how I want them to remember this experience. And I don't want, although there is some coaching, correcting, comforting that I'm having to do, at the same time, I don't want this experience to be an experience where that's what they remember. I also want this to be a time where we experience the messiness of grace and we're just with each other and being with each other in the midst of all of the imperfections and dwelling with one another and bonding and building memories. So for me, it's important to walk that line, whether it's a parental relationship, a spousal relationship, a sibling relationship, you name it.
Right. I think that it's a very interesting, fine line that we do need to be thinking about and honoring, because you're so right. There are going to be things that we're noticing in our kids that we just haven't had that perspective before, or maybe in our marriage partner. But we also have to be thinking about the conditions, the stress, the difference of how this lifestyle right now is. And we're all going to probably be a little more sensitive than usual, a little more stressed than usual, a little more thrown off. It's maybe not exactly the best time to try to figure everything out. Exactly. So, Dr. Dharius, how do we assess the level of relational intelligence we have? I think it would be tempting to assume that if I'm pretty popular, if I've got a wide network of friends, if I'm really comfortable, at some kind of meet and greet, that I must have a really high degree of relational intelligence. But I sense that what you're talking about is something deeper, and that it involves a health level within relationship that's a little bit different. Is that accurate?
Yeah, 100%. I think sometimes people can confuse relational intelligence with personalities. And a person would assume that if I'm extroverted and gregarious and I'm outgoing, then that means that there's high relational intelligence. And if I'm introverted and a bit more strategic and measured, then I'm not. So I definitely don't want people to confuse what we're talking about with a personality type. But it is this ability to define and align relationships. And you're right, that requires a degree of it's IQ and EQ produces RQ, right? So,
I love that.
It's this combination of both, all of these areas determine where we are on the relational intelligence meter. We actually came up with this assessment. It's on our website, DhariusDanielsRQ.com, for free, where people can kind of take it and just kind of see where they are. But I believe that one of the ways that we really see how good we are at this is, for example, taking friends. It's not just how many good friends I have. It's what my friends say I'm a good one. I think to get an accurate assessment of where I am, it really requires a perspective other than my own. Because depending on how you're wired, you may rate yourself higher than what's actually realistic, or depending on your personality, you may rate yourself lower. But I really feel like engaging kind of in conversation with people you're in relationship with is a way to help keep your finger on the pulse of kind of where you are and how you're doing, not just what type of friends do I have, but what type of friend am I?
I love that distinction about saying it's not personality, because that to me is a great leveler. I think a lot of times we can think that we don't have relational intelligence if we haven't learned how to be the most powerful networker, or we stumble a lot in terms of trying to develop a new friendship. I love that you eliminate that personality is really the thing that is the factor in this that really makes the difference. I'll make sure that we put in our show notes that Rebecca, our content coordinator, puts up every week to go with the podcast to give our listeners access to that free assessment. I think that's really powerful. And I want to state again for my listeners that beautiful little equation you gave, which is IQ, your intelligence quotient, plus your EQ, your emotional quotient, meaning how well you manage emotion and all that, equals your relational quotient, your RQ. I think that's really a beautiful way of looking at how these things all work together. You have a 5-step way that you think is really powerful for people to take a look at the relationships in their lives, because let's face it, Dr. Dharius, relationships are so critical in how we navigate the world. And we've heard it said, we say it to our kids, but sometimes we need to be reminded again, those people you surround yourself with have a whole lot to do with how the trajectory of your life is going. Your spiritual life, your marriage, your work life, it has so much to do with how well you're walking alongside other people and the caliber, with everyone being loved and adored by God. I'm not trying to create tiers that are unfair, but saying if I'm surrounding myself with a group of women who are all in really unhappy marriages, then I'm going to be really tempted to start heading down that path and to feel like just because of the way humans communicate, I need to match their communications. It's hard to be the person in that crowd standing up and looking for something higher in your marriage. Same thing within our churches, same thing within our work world. So give us the 5 steps that really help us walk through and determine who needs to be our closest, and who can be in a broader circle of friends. Not that we don't value them, but we're really trying to be intentional about making sure that our relationships are fully carrying us through that purpose that God has for our lives.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I think it's so powerful. And we, like you mentioned, we kind of walk through the book. There's some steps. And so we would say one of the first things that has to be done is that there's the defining of relationships, meaning what are those circles, those layers of intimacy and investment for you. And that's what this is about. I think that it's really easy to have, some apprehension to embrace this, because it can feel like this is so unchristian. This is categorizing people. This is conditional love as opposed to unconditional love. And this idea of aligning relationships or having these, knowing who kind of belongs in what circle and what level of intimacy you have with them it's just simply about aligning your expectations and your investment, knowing where am I supposed to invest more and who can I expect what from. So that's what this is about. And we need to define them. We need to discern them. We need to align them. And then we need to assess them. And so those are the steps that we kind of want to walk people through to kind of really wrap their head around how they should be managing relationships.
So I hear a little bit of relational chiropractic going on here when you use the word align. Describe for me in that step what it means to align relationships in a way that brings the most health to everyone.
So first of all, I think it starts with this perspective. And that is, I believe that my relational well-being does not have to come at someone else's expense. I really believe that. So what is in the best interest of me relationally, or me acting in what's in the best interest of me relationally, is not selfishness, it's stewardship. And even if it is not what the other person prefers, I believe it is also what both of us need. And so when I say alignment, I think I mentioned earlier, it really comes down to 2 things. It's this whole idea of really taking a moment to assess the fruit of a person's character, to be honest with ourselves about our own feelings and connection or lack thereof that we have with a person, and then making a decision that I am going to invest accordingly, time, energy, emotion, and I can expect accordingly so that I do not have expectations of people that they have not demonstrated that they have the fruit to fulfill.
I love that designation because oftentimes you're right. We bring such expectation to relationship, and there are simply people that is not a place that is their gifting or their role in our lives. And when we try to put all of that expectation on one person or two people or on a friendship that we have, felt like, well, if I were to be a good friend with somebody, this is what it would look like. And we try to put that on someone that is not the way they're wired. It does lead to a level of unhealth that's not really fair. So this concept of bringing stewardship into relationship is such a powerful one. I love a statement you make, which is that there are no casual relationships, that all relationships are catalytic in one way or another. And so it's on us, right, to decide where we want that catalytic energy of a relationship with someone, the way we want to drive it. I think it can either do what? Activate us to be a helper to someone who needs it. And then perhaps there's another relationship that the catalyst in that one is that's somebody who's a great mentor for us. Is that kind of how you see the way that the catalytic nature of relationships plays out?
Yeah, I do. And I think I don't want us to confuse catalytic with immediate.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah. And so sometimes where the relationship is helping me progress and it's productive or it's not productive, sometimes the impact of it is not seen immediate. But I use the word catalytic in terms of it being significant. I think it was Paul who said, don't be deceived. Bad company corrupts good character. So the fact that he says, don't be deceived, says to us that it's possible for us to be unaware of the impact that a relationship is having on us.
Right.
And so I think that's what I mean by that. And, it's also catalytic in the sense that there is no area of our life that is not impacted by them.
Absolutely.
Directly or indirectly, whether it's spiritual health or financial health or professional or whatever, all of it's going to be impacted by the people that we have in our life. I think we say in the book, God's greatest gifts walk into our lives on two legs.
I love that. How do you help people navigate when they take a moment, they take a look at the relational situations in their lives, and they realize, wow, I've got a setting in my life, whether that's extended family or work, or maybe I'm in a church situation, that I'm starting to understand, I am developing the intelligence to understand is not something that is life-giving and is something that, whether it's patterns that have been created or whatever else, I probably need to recategorize where I'm allowing some of those relationships to live. How do you help people navigate when they come to that awareness that perhaps a relationship they've put a lot of investment in and they've placed somebody in a pretty primo role that's needing to change?
I think that's kind of the hardest part of this practice for many people. And I think if a person does not see this as stewardship of their own life and also something that is in the best interest of the other person, it's really, really, really hard to execute this. You can have all of the knowledge and the bow in the arrow, but you won't let it go. And so for me, one of the things that we try to help people do is, I think in the book, there are some mock scripts. Now, obviously, we don't expect people to read them verbatim, but there are some mock scripts and some mock scenarios, because there are times where a relationship is somewhat on the fringe, meaning, let's say it's what I would call an associate in the book, that the relationship is primarily a result of intersecting schedules. We work together, we serve on the ministry team together, our kids play AAU or soccer or whatever together, so we spend a lot of time together. And all of a sudden, a person may notice, you know what, this is not something I feel like is safe for me or life-giving. Well, one of the things that they can end up, if that relationship is kind of on the fringe, one of the things they can end up doing is you can kind of progressively decrease your investment and it not significantly alter or impact the other person.
Right.
Doesn't require a come to Jesus conversation. But then there are those others that do require those conversations. And I think the important thing to do is, even if there are things about the person that make you uncomfortable, what we advocate for in the book with the scripts is to make the conversation about your life, not their flaws. Now, you know what? You're just so negative. So I
got to get away from you. Yeah.
Yeah.
What not to do.
It's
Got
not.
it.
Yeah.
And so what do we do in those situations where there is an untangling that needs to happen? It's somebody that we can't just do it by, sort of decreasing the amount of time that we spend together in a really subtle way. How do we go about taking that moment and saying, because it's going to sound classic, right? Oh, it's not you, it's me. But how do we do that in a way where we really own, it really is some things I'm working on in my own life?
Well, I really feel like at the core of what this is it's speaking the truth in love. It really is. And it can be really difficult. This is what I've seen. I have to stop my kids from doing that. They don't do it often in love, but they do it. What I found is sometimes the more a person kind of matriculates into adulthood, they become more hesitant to actually do that. And so I feel like, it's like, no, I don't want you to come. Kids will be like, I don't want you to come over my house because you don't share the ball.
Much more clear. Yeah, exactly. And we stop doing that. We start getting a lot more political. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes that can ease some things, but sometimes it means we end up with some relationships that we didn't really set out to put in that spot, right?
Yeah. So we talk about, if you got to have the conversation, a few things. You got to pray. That's one. You got to plan. That's two. What am I going to say? When is the best time to do this? What is the best way to do it? And then you got to perform, meaning that you got to be willing to say that last 10%. Sometimes the thing that you kind of take some time. I think I'm going to kind of take some time away. And, maybe, if you know that is not the case, you don't want to you want to love them enough not to mislead them. And so I feel like that's really important in terms of thinking through those conversations. You want to pray because you want to be emotionally sober and you want to be in the right place. You want to plan what you say matters, when you say matters, and how you say it matters. And then at some point, you've got to perform, because faith without works is dead.
Dr. Dharius, such great information. And I'll make sure that Rebecca has in the show notes for everybody where they can find you and find the book. I can't thank you enough for the way you've invested in our listeners today in helping them think forward in their relationships, and also in how to manage relationships right now, as we are in a unique season. But I know that people are going to be gleaning so much from this interview on the other side of all of this. So thanks so much for all that you do in your ministry and in helping people really increase their ability and, the abundance in their relationships. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
You can look for Dr. Dharius Daniels and all of his information in the show notes that Rebecca, our content coordinator, puts together each and every week. A big thanks to Donna, our producer, who makes sure that the podcast gets out to you each and every week. Hey, listen up. I want you to go to allmomdoes.com. That's allmomdoes.com and allmomdoes on the socials. You're going to find there a community of women who are walking through seasons of life just like you are, trying to figure out all the things, work, kids, relationships, and spiritual. It's just all of it. Please go to allmomdoes.com and check out all the goodness that is there. And I would love to connect with you too on the socials. I'm Julie Lyles Carr at all the places. Hey, do this for me. It means so much when you subscribe and like and share the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It actually helps us get the word out about the podcast and lets us know that you're listening. I would so appreciate it if you would go do that for us. I'll see you next time on the Modern Motherhood Podcast.